ask you, so part of Islamic eschatology, it says that the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims will be fighting against each other until they realize the greater enemy. And you pointed out the immigration problem. This has been a cycle where there's war in the Middle East. And then, of course, there's so many immigrants because you destabilize the country, you implement regime change, and then people need a place to live. Then the majority Muslim nations, these people go into Europe, predominantly white Christian countries, and there's conflict and they start blaming the Muslims. They start hating. But there's many videos of rabbis saying, well, actually, we love this and the Goyim are fighting each other. They don't really see the bigger picture and what's going on. And eventually in Islamic eschatology, it says Christians and Muslims will unite and realize what is going on. But if it's true that Israel wants America to lose this war so that they have dominant control over the Middle East, because they exist off of American dollars and American troops, how could they afford and how could they protect and how could they have greater Israel without American support? They're a small population. They would have less money. Are they capable of controlling the Middle East without America?
Right. So I think that's one of the great misconceptions in the world, which is that Israel is dependent on American power. That's not true, actually. Israel is far more superior than people recognize. Israel has the most dominant military in the Middle East. In fact, I would argue that it's really the American military that restrains the power of the Israelis. That's point one. The Israel military, especially its military intelligence, basically Unit 8200, is very powerful. We have to remember that in modern warfare, it's not really about land armies. It's not really about war of attrition. It's more about technology, right? So drone strikes, targeted assassinations, electronic warfare. These things matter a lot more, and the Israelis have proven themselves to be extremely competent in this regard. So go back to the Hezbollah pager attacks, right? Where you know, like one like it was a coordinated explosion of pagers. Think about the amount of resources that Israel needed to have in order to pull that off. And remember, that's just one thing that we know about, and that's point one. Like the Israeli military is far more sophisticated than people give it credit for. But it's just their MO to hide themselves, to pretend that they're weak and to completely dependent on American power. That's just their game plan. Okay, that's point one. Point two is that you assume that Israel is only the nation state of Israel. That's not true. The nation state of Israel also can draw on the Jewish diaspora, right? So if you are a wealthy Jewish business person in Nairobi or Cape Town, you probably have Mossad links, okay? And we can know because of the Epstein files. Go back to the early 20th century and look at like gangsters like Meyer Lansky. And you know, Whitney Webb, I'm not sure if you interviewed Whitney Webb.
I want to.
She documents this. Yeah, but she's wonderful. She documents how Meyer Lansky, the Brofman families, these are all Jewish mafia families that have really close ties to the state of Israel. In fact, you could argue like they weren't really mobsters. They were really operatives on behalf of this Jewish diaspora in order to create the financing, the weaponry, the political patronage in order to help support Israel. And you can imagine that this criminal network, what eventually happened is they didn't go away. What happened was that they intermarried into the national security apparatus, right? Because remember, the CIA was founded with mafia support, both the Jewish mafia support and the Italian mafia support. Why? Because during the Cold War, the CIA did not have foreign intelligence networks, but the Jews and Italians did have foreign intelligence networks. Okay.
So this is how they were smuggling weapons in. This is
exactly.
So the mafia was bringing weapons in from around. So it's not really the nation state of Israel is the land, but it's really organized the system of Pax Judaica all working together. That's right. Why when you say it's Pax Judaica, so when you say Epstein worked for Israel because he was financed by Leslie Wexner and Leon Black, Jewish Zionists, although they live in America, it's still supporting the greater idea and the belief in that eschatology. They go hand in hand. So when people like, know, Hassan Piker, they say it's fascism, that is a really minimal way to discuss what is Jewish supremacy, and which goes to the Chabad Lubavitch sect, which Tucker Carlson has accurately pointed out, and rabbinical Judaism, which is not part of original Torah Judaism.
Right. So what's really important to understand is that the nation state of Israel is just a tool in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
Okay. So you talk about Chabad Lubavitch, which is what Torah Carlson talked about.
Yeah.
Well, Chabad Lubavitch is just the current manifestation of a movement called Sabbatean Francus, and I talked about that in my lectures,
Yeah.
right? So the Chabad Lubavitch, so like if you just look at the Epstein files, what you recognize is that this guy was above the nation state. It was just assumed for the longest time that he was a Mossad agent, and Epstein Island was a honeypot operation where he lured, these very powerful Americans like Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, to the Epstein Island so that he could film them in compromising activities. And now, if you actually look at the reporting, you actually look at the Epstein files, what we recognize is that no, that's not true. The Epstein Island was just a weekend getaway, and he was filming them for fun. It was not a blackmail operation. In fact, when Bill Gates and Reid Hoffman, billionaires, okay, these are billionaires, when they were asked why were you associating with this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, their response was, we wanted his money. We were hoping that he would give us money, which is like, what are you talking about? You guys are billionaires. Why do you need his money? So it's very confusing. Plus, he was using code words like, what the hell is pizza and grape soda?
And
What the hell is
jerky
going
and
to the
ice creams.
dentist and beef jerky? What is that crap? Okay, so none of this makes sense. But if you assume that he was an operative not for the nation state of Israel, but for a movement that's trying to achieve a certain eschatology, the Chabad Lubavitch people, that makes a lot more sense, right? Because the leader of Chabad Lubavitch is Rabbi Sneerson. And I'm not sure if you know this, but
He
they
claims
are
to be the
extremely
Messiah.
wealthy. Yeah, he claims the Messiah. And um, and Jerry Epstein was basically an operative who was trying to achieve worldly gains in order to help this movement achieve its eschatology, right? They're trying to accelerate the end times. They're trying to bring about the coming of the Messiah and the destruction of the world so that they can repair the world. Their language is actually redemption and repair the world. And then you're like, okay, I don't understand this. Okay, then think about this, okay? When Jeffrey Epstein died, who replaced him? And then you ask yourself, okay, who is Jared Kushner? And why is he involved in Ukrainian peace negotiations? Why is he an envoy to Israel on behalf of Trump? And why is he participating in the Iranian peace negotiations? Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are envoys who went to Ukraine to negotiate with Putin to end the war. They met with Zelensky to end the war. They are very close with Netanyahu. And then they represented Trump in peace negotiations with the Iranians. Who are these people? Right? Jared Kushner is a replacement for Jeffrey Epstein. And that all makes sense if you think about it that way. And so what are these guys trying to do? They're trying to fulfill eschatology. They're trying to position world events in a certain way that would accelerate the collapse of the world, which is what Jeffrey Epstein did. Remember, we only have at most 50% of his emails. It's possibly, it could be 2% of his emails. We know nothing about what he was doing during 9/11. In fact, you may not know this, but Howard Lutnick,
Yep.
who was chairman of Cantor Fitzgerald, the firm
His firm
that
was
was
600
destroyed.
dead, about 1/4,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah,
3,000
yeah.
deaths.
But miraculously,
He wasn't there.
he and his brother were not there.
Right. And he's the current Secretary of Commerce under Trump today. Next door neighbors
Right.
with Epstein. Epstein lived in building 9. Howard Lutnick lived in building 11.
So right? Like what a strange coincidence that is. 9/11, right?
Yeah.
So we can assume that there was involvement. Jeffrey Epstein was involved in 9/11, and he was involved with Libya. He was involved with the 2008 great financial crisis. So this guy was clued in on all these geopolitical events. So who was this guy, and what was he doing? And if you think about it, it's very similar to what Jared Kushner is doing today, right? Where Jared Kushner is working in finance. He's got $2 billion from the Saudis, and now he's manipulating events in the Middle East. And again, the point is to bring about the end times, which is what Torah Carlson talked about.
Right.
And like you can't talk about this because Chabad Lubavitch is apparently a very sensitive topic. I watch Torah Carlson's like discussion, and he didn't really say anything. Okay, I mean, like it was not that. I mean, like it was just all publicly available information about Chabad Lubavitch, and he was attacked
Yeah.
constantly online
Yeah.
for just mentioning Chabad Lubavitch,
Hmm.
right? But if you want to understand how everything works, just go do an investigation about Chabad Lubavitch. Look at their eschatology.
Yeah.
Look at Rabbi Sneerson and what he did. There's a very famous video online of Robert Sneerson talking to Netanyahu. And this is in the 1980s, guys.
Yeah,
This is in the 1980s. And Sneerson's like, the Messiah. We have to bring him back. So let's speed it up, man.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Begging him to speed it up. So you're right. Israel is just another pawn in this greater system. It's much
right.
bigger than Israel, far bigger than fascism. And again, the Chabad Lubavitch synagogue, there's a lot, world leaders meet at this synagogue here in New York City, where I live. These are where the people were talking about the Jewish tunnels, where people were popping up like Mario, lifting up the sewer caps. Those tunnels connected into the Chabad Lubavitch synagogue. We didn't see any real investigation. Some people found images of bloody mattresses, and nothing came about. All over New York, if you look at any of the stop signs, if you look at any of the crosswalk signs, they have posters up saying Mashiach now with the picture of Rabbi Schneerson. This is all over New York City. It's right in front of our faces, but if you mention it, you'll get a coordinated attack like you did. So I think you are right. It is somewhat simplifying. I think a lot of people who speak about this know that saying things like Israelis or Zionists, it is a simpler way to describe what is much greater. And again, looking back at the Epstein files, I think you have a great analysis of Jared Kushner. He's married to Ivanka Trump, Trump's daughter. Looking back now, if you see Trump's videos on stage at The View and others and Howard Stern, the way he's talking about Ivanka Trump, and again, Epstein said that Trump was one of the most evil people he's ever met. Trump is saying, perhaps I'd be dating Ivanka if she wasn't my daughter. Maybe, if this is the most evil man that Epstein ever knew, then the blackmail perhaps is maybe something Frankists, which you pointed out in your lecture. Frankists were people that were, fathers sleeping with daughters. This was some of the most evil things they could do, because sinning gave them the propensity to find the divine within, because God is not capable of sin, but we are. And so this ideology has subverted, and it is supportive of the greater thing. Some people are saying that, your analysis of Freemasons and Frankists, that it's a distraction. No, these are subsects that support a greater eschatology, which is to accelerate corruption in the land so that the false Messiah can come.
Yeah. So what I want to do now, and I want your permission, is to go over some of the eschatology so people understand what's going on.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. So the first thing we need to figure out is the Kabbalah. Okay. So I'm going to give you a simplified version of the Kabbalah to start off with.
The book of mysticism, witchcraft derived from this book.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So what the Kabbalah is doing is that it's taking the Torah, the Old Testament, and it's reinterpreting through the lens of Gnostic Hermetic philosophy, understanding that the world is consciousness, that God is everywhere and everything. Okay, so let me give you an example of the Kabbalah in practice. Okay, so the story of Adam and Eve, right? One of the major questions about the story of Adam and Eve is, why did Adam and Eve disobey God? And that's a mystery. And the Kabbalah answer is this. The Kabbalah answer is that there are two forces in the world, okay? There's God, and then there's us, okay? The creature he creates. God is the manifestation of love, which is the will to bestow. God is generous. But for him to bestow, he needs to create something to bestow him onto, okay? So he creates something called Adam Kanman, okay? The world soul, the first creation. And Adam Kanman is the will to receive, okay? Because that's how God created him. The problem, though, is that the will to receive is pure ego. And if you're egotistical, you misinterpret the actions of others. So Adam Kanman didn't really understand why God would bestow everything on him, okay? So it's almost like, you have a friend, and this friend loves you, and this friend wants to be generous to you. So this friend spends a lot of money, $1,000, to cook the best meal possible, okay? And then the friend invites you to his house, and you see this sumptuous banquet, okay? It's like this most elaborate dinner, and you're embarrassed by all this. You're like, I don't deserve this, or like, what is your intention? Do you need money from me? Like what's going on here? Okay. So Adam Kenmon, as the will to receive, as pure ego, he's not able to receive the fullness of the divine light. Okay. And in fact, this reception spills over, which creates more worlds. And in fact, Adam Kenmon then has to split into 600,000 souls, right? And that this is called breaking the world. So the role of the Jews is that they're actually one of the 600,000 souls. This is really important to understand. We are not, as non-Jews, not a human soul. We're animal soul, but they are human soul, okay? So what they need to do is bring back all 600,000 souls together in the state of Israel and then redeem themselves. Redeeming themselves just means absolute obedience to God, absolute understanding that God is pure love, and to receive the full light of God fully, okay? So this is about the reunion of the Jews and God, okay? The chosen people and his God, in order to repair the world. So that's why they have to create the state of Israel. That's why they have to bring about the return of the Jewish diaspora. And that's why they need to destroy the world in order to create Pax Judaica, because it is God's will that the Jews rule over the world, because they are human and we are animals, okay? So that's the basic eschatology that they have in mind. And it's most promoted, of course, by Sapin Frankus, which is now manifested in the Chabad Lubavitch movement.
Mm-hmm. And I saw your lecture about Adam and Eve and the idea of the monad, that actually Eve was speaking to Satan and not speaking to God, and it was inverted, right? Inversion is the idea of Satanism, that everything is reversed. In Islam, we believe that this is what the Antichrist will claim to be God and present heaven and hell. Hell will be heaven and heaven will be hell, and the people that fall for it make the gravest mistake that they could ever make. So can you explain the monad? Because that was difficult to understand. Does that supersede, in your view, does that supersede God? And because you were talking about how monotheistic religions and what the Jesuit order, the books that are removed in the Bible, this is trying to protect the fact that there's the Nephilim and that humans were mating with angels, and that there were demigods upon earth, which people say are manifested, and they could find these zombies in the desert